This week's Parsha being Shmini, and Shmini is about the 8th day of the inauguration, the 8th day of the inauguration of the Mishkan, as the Bnei Yisrael were traveling in the Midbar, and in the Midbar they had built the tabernacle. The idea of the tabernacle is the place of meeting with godliness, and how God said that He would dwell with the Jewish people in the Midbar and with them. The Mishkan was set up over a period of 7 days, and on the 8th day, Hashem accepted the korbanos, and there was the expression of God's revelation by a fire coming down from heaven and eating up and consuming the korban. Okay, so that is the recap, very quick, simple understanding of the recap of the first words of the psukim, which relate to the Parsha Shmini and God's connection with Bnei Yisrael. In a simple sense, there was a period of inauguration. There was a period of working with the newly set up Mishkan till it was officially and until it was actually brought in a functioning state, which was after 7 days of preparation. It was the 8th day. The Parsha starts up with the words, and on the 8th day. This is the idea of Shmini, meaning 8. So on a simple sense, this is the understanding of how it was. On a much more deeper sense, we talk about that Hashem created the world in 7 days. We talk about 6 days of creation. 7th day, Hashem rested from his sense of creation, and we naturally feel and work with in a cycle, in a Jewish cycle of 7 days. 6th day being Shabbos, 7th day, 6 days of the week of work, seventh day being Shabbos. We connect to this idea, and this idea is reflected in everything that we do in the Jewish time cycle. The deeper meaning that goes with it is that things which pertain to the natural world, things which pertain to dimensions within the physical world, are contained in the framework of a 7 day period, and hence, as the Jewish nation is told to, that they can be involved in the world, in the physical entities, and involvement in creative activity for the 6 days. On the 7th day is a day of Shabbos, is a day of resting from creative activity and transcending the dimension of physicality by enjoying a holiness of Shabbos. In this particular day, this particular Mishkan day, the 8th day, in fact, Hashem is trying to give us another idea, the idea of that the number of 8 being a dimension of holiness, a dimension of godliness, but that's not contained within the world. Because Hashem, what Hashem said, that I'm coming to dialogue, I'm coming to meet you, I'm coming to bring my infiniteness into the finite world, and that was expressed by certain miracles which happened in the Mishkan, but notwithstanding this, that it was within the physical world, within the Mishkan itself, it brought a dimension which transcends the natural order of 6 days a week, and even transcending the holiness of the day 7 of the Shabbos day to another order, to another idea altogether. Hence, the Mishkan was called that it was on the 8th day, even though this day actually happened to be the first of a month, the first of Nisan, Nevertheless, in the Torah, this is called on the eighth. It's used by the expression on the eighth day. On the eighth day, there was the inauguration of Mishkan. The idea of eight, giving us the idea of the transcendence beyond existence within the physical world, even beyond existence within the spiritual world of Shabbos. So eight has to be seen as a superstructure on the structured world of seven. That is to say, God is showing us that even in the structured world of 6 plus 7, there is also the idea of a world of godliness which is even beyond that. Hinted in this idea, we find the idea of that in the times of Mashiach, we talk about that there will be the harp of Mashiach, and the harp of Mashiach will be a harp of 8 strings. An interesting other concept, because the concept of Mashiach, the concept of the anointed one of the King Mashiach, which is the period of time which goes beyond the natural existence, seems to be this emphasis on the idea 8. So in the Messianic era, the idea is that God's infinite light will be able to be seen within the constraints of the finite light, of the finite world. It won't be such that there is the idea of, despite the finite, there will be some sort of otherworldliness. There won't be, it's not to give the impression of struggling against finiteness that spirituality will appear. But the discussion is that in Mashiach's time, there'll be the worldliness, there will be the spiritual light, the infinite spiritual light of Mashiach, of something otherworldly, embedded within the finiteness of the world. That is, the verse says that Kol Boser Yara, all the flesh will see, and all the flesh will see that Hashem has spoken. Meaning to say that we'll be able to not just see in a imaginary sense, but we'll be able to see godliness in a physical sense. That implies to us that the physical world will change in some respects. And that's implied by the idea of Mashiach's harp will have 8 strings. In fact, we talk about the time of Mashiach when the sheep will be lying with the sheep, the lamb will be lying with the wolf. Won't the wolf be trying to consume the sheep? What we're saying, that the desire to express what we now call his natural instincts will have been modified and changed by the special revelations of Mashiach, of holiness and goodness, and seeing, and thereby will allow, in a non-dangerous way, the sheep to coexist, the lamb to coexist with the wolf. We'll be able to see God in some sort of natural visual experience. But that begs the question, isn't our physical experience of the world defined because the whole holiness of Hashem, the greatest spiritual revelation of God, is essentially concealed? So if we're talking about the finite world, how will we be able to see God's infinity within that physical sense? Because God himself has designated the idea of being concealed a motivation for revelation itself. Every time that we understand that there is a level of concealment and we want to break through that, that inspires us to potentially break through it to a state of vision. As an example, we have in our existence as well. Each time we have a problem, we look to a solution. We look to provide a solution. Therefore, we have this idea of concealment. But with embedded in that concealment is the potential for a breakthrough, for being able to see some holiness beyond. Therefore, this leads us to a very interesting concept. This leads to the concept that every negativity has embedded in it a level of beyondness that exhibits the capacity to go beyond it. And as we are taught that Hashem provides the cure before he provides the disease, as an expression, as a concept, and therefore in every spiritual concealment that has the potential to waken up within the world and a person a level of empowerment that now allows us to break through that. Now, in regular vocabulary framework of Jewish expression, we talk about, in a physical sense, that the Jews were exiled from their Holy Land, and therefore they're called in exile. Conceptually, and in the language, and in this sort of language, we talk about every exile has the capability to elicit higher powers from the Jewish nation to go beyond the exile and come to a state of redemption. So this idea of exile having in its core, it has a level that with the self-sacrifice through the trial, through the efforts, the Jewish nation can find the seeds via their own self-sacrifice to go beyond that and break through to a revelation. So therefore, as an outcome of that, it follows that revelation, that is geula, the expression in Hebrew, geula, revelation, redemption, is not something foreign to the natural world where godliness is concealed. It tells us that as in the creative experience of God, he embeds the cure along with, to use an expression, the cure with the disease, that the cure has been there with the disease. And what is that? That's the capability of the individual to be able to utilize his own talents, what we call in the terminology, his self-sacrifice, or in Hebrew we call his mesiras nefesh. He's giving himself up, meaning in this context that he finds the strength within inside of himself by sublimating his other experiences and looking for the cure to heal himself. And that in the concealment is embedded the revelation. So therefore, in a more macro sense, that God has hidden himself from the world means that his revelation in a latent state is there all along and has been there all along, and is there ready to be woken up for the purposes of the ultimate redemption and revelation of himself. Is just there in a hidden state. So therefore, we find in our literature, written in our literature, we find the words that, and the Alter Rebbe writes, the first Lubavitch Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman, writes that the revelations of Mashiach, the ultimate Geula, the ultimate revelation, are dependent on our work and deeds throughout the duration of the exile. We have a question. We think that Mashiach, and we think that revelation is independent of us, and God will bring it to us. But we actually write that it's dependent on our work, but it's actually written by the Alter Rebbe that it's dependent on our good deeds and study of the Torah in the duration of the exile. What's the dependency? But from this previous explanation that we've just said, when a person's devotion intensifies because of the golus that he's in, because he's in that negative circumstances of not seeing the holiness of Hashem and not being in a state of revelation, he himself, his own efforts become stronger and stronger to be able to get out of that negative constraint. He demonstrates and shows that the concealment of godliness is only superficial, because deep inside he's looking for the light, and that is to say that the Jew is trying to find the ultimate purpose of creation, to reveal that light. Therefore, we can say that light which is totally hidden, which something which is beyond the part of the world, but even beyond the world, we can say that the purpose of the whole of creation is to be able to reveal that level which is beyond the world, which we've just called 8, which when we started teaching, or we talk about this week's Parsha Shmini, we're talking about the revelation of godliness in this world in a revealed state. That's the purpose. So therefore, initially, in the initial creation of the world, we find that there is the ultimate creation, creative forces and powers that can be revealed, which is the power of the level of 8. And that's the infinite light of Hashem. So we can note and we can understand that the 8, as we discussed, in a simple sense, the number 8 comes after the level of 7, because we have to go through the processes, what's embedded in the framework of nature, or in the framework of physical existence, which we've allegorically described with the number 7, in order to reveal within the 7, we can reveal the 8. And then what we do is that we can say that as a natural consequence of the work that we've done in the period of 7, as a consequence of that, we've produced a transcendent revelation and our dedication to Hashem himself. So this is the idea that connects the beginning of our Parsha. This connects the idea of the beginning of the Parsha with the content in Parsha Shmini, which is at the end of the Parsha. So we haven't spoken about this part yet, but what we have spoken about is that the beginning of the Parsha, we talk about the inauguration of the Mishkan, the inauguration of godliness being revealed in this world. The end of the Parsha speaks about the division and how to identify animals which are considered toher and tomei, the pure and impure animals. So what gives that capability to eventually reveal the holiness of the 8. The idea of working through the level, the ideas of toher and tome, the ideas of pure and impure. Through that, working through that, we can come to the deep revelations, because the Torah empowers us to elevate and make our finite world better by making distinctions between the pure and the impure, and by avoiding the negative, that is, by avoiding the contamination that comes from non-pure food, and giving elevation and utilizing the what we consider the pure food or pure animals. That is to say, by avoiding the negative, we give the negative a purpose, and we elevate it to the level of what we normally use as positive, as the kosher food. So therefore, by avoiding non-kosher food, we give it a purpose in terms of elevation, by elevating it to somewhat of the state of the kosher food, which we actually do eat. In other words, we bring light into the world. We transform also the darkest and make it high value, like the kosher, like the purest place. And then when we have that, when we reveal that within the negative there is the positive by avoiding it, we allude to, when we give credence to the number 8, which the number 8 says something going beyond the revelation, the existent revelation that we have at the moment, through our own personal self-sacrifice, and reveal the depth, and we reveal the revelation of God's transcendence within the finite world, are still associated with 7, but beyond, but revealing the beyond. So I'll conclude by giving us all a blessing that we should be able to utilize in this week, the connecting form, the holiness of the level 6s and 7, so that we can come to the revelation of godliness in this world.